So this is a bottle of Comte champagne. This particular bottle is the 2012. In 12 is when we first bought property. And it was the beginning of the whole story of us trying to make French vintage champagne, but do it here in the Willamette Valley. Very excited to taste this. Memories come flowing back. There's something that I always refer to as a zip that you get from Comte champagne that you don't get from a lot of other sparkling wines or French champagne, and it has that. It's almost an indescribable note, a kind of freshness, effervescence, but not too acidic. This is the wine that inspired me to begin the lytle barnett process. We're in the Oregon wine country, in particular the North Willamette Valley, and we're in a sub-AVA called the Eola Amity Hills. You know, Pinot Noir has been in the valley for a long time. It really had already been established. There's a lot of Pinot producers. But we really felt that Chardonnay had kind of come into its own in 2008 and 9. So the ability to have the Chardonnay and the Pinot Noir, you know, really the two major components that you really need for champagne or sparkling wine here in Oregon really kind of came together. So when it comes to the climate, in Champagne, they're very similar as it relates to the temperature, air quality, what's happening here. But when it comes to the soils, it's a bit of a point of difference. In Champagne, chalky minerality soils is really what you're working with. What you're getting here is mostly volcanic and marine sediment. So they're very similar in styles, made almost exactly in the same way, but your flavor profiles are just going to be a little bit different, mostly because of the soil.
Somewhere near the center of the Willamette Valley lies the Eola Amity AVA. As an AVA, we're getting something really special where there's an element of minerality and the extreme cool climate that just suits sparkling wine very well.
When we started looking for a winemaker, we needed somebody that really was thinking quality first. Andrew's known as kind of the bubbles guy for the state of Oregon, in particular the Willamette Valley. Andrew brings that Oregon authenticity and at the same time understands the traditions of French vintage champagne and follows those to the T. So we're in alignment in the way we do it.
Andy is a spectacular guy. He's generous, he is fun, he is as open as they come, and that is unique in the business world. He knows what he wants and he trusts that we can give it to him. And that has been a joy to work with. I don't think that anyone gets into the sparkling game, especially in the new world, to be making money. Eventually it will, we all hope it does, but there is such a lag period between, especially with vintage sparkling, between the time you pull it off of the vine and the time you are able to sell it 7 years later. This is a tough business model.
It's nerve-wracking for sure. You know, by the time you harvest and by the time you release, it's 5 to 6 years, depending on how long that you're gonna keep that laying down entourage. And, you know, that's a long time to wait. And wondering if each of those 6 or 7 consecutive vintages that we had done was worth it. So the release of the 13, it was quite the endeavor. Here we are, the 2013 Brut Rosé. So if we think about that from a perspective, we're going into our 12th vintage together in 2024. I don't know how you put up with me for that long. I go back to the first time, we got together, and I remember we were sitting down in a restaurant having a conversation. And I think that conversation was in like late spring. And you said, when do you want to make sparkling? I said, this year. And you looked at me like, are you crazy? Where are we going to get the wine? Where are we going to get the grapes? And so that began.
And what was your answer?
I said, well, I thought you'd do that.
And where are we going to make it?
Exactly. And I said, oh, I thought we'd make it at your place. So it was a well thought out plan, right?
That was a brilliant plan.
By the grace of God, I asked you at the right time and you said yes. And we started making lytle barnett together for the 2013 vintage. We went out there and, we sourced it from a really beautiful vineyard down in Eola Amity.
We did. We were really, really lucky. And lucky is the point.
Yeah.
Things fell together very nicely for this vintage. This was a bit of a surprise for us in that we were somewhat rushed to find this, and we were blessed by finding more or less the vineyard I wanted. It was high elevation, Eola Amity Hills, lovely fruit, but it had been farmed not specifically for sparkling wine. So when we said, okay, it's time to call the pick, make it happen, their answer was, oh my God, we can't do that. We don't have bins, we don't have pickers. They were not expecting someone to be picking
That early.
And that was a challenge of the first vintage, for sure. But the end result is glorious. I'm very happy with what came out of it. I would say that this is a beautiful example of an aged rosé where the color reflects some of the flavors. This is not something that's wildly fruit forward and in your face. This is something that has layers, and some of the fruit is faded, but somewhat has come behind it with flavors that are more floral, a little bit deeper toned, a little bit richer, and the nose just has layers of both yeast and baking spice, but there is that core of malted flour as well as rose and a little bit of strawberry, cherry mixed in, and the bubbles with this much time in the bottle, especially this much time on the cork, have calmed down and created something that's truly special. Sparkling wine is a wine that does not want to be shortchanged. The technical aspect being that there's no way to get around the fact that the tiny bubbles that you get, the nuances of flavor can only come with time. So for us, 3 years is just the beginning, and that's when the flavors we're looking for begin the development process. So we're looking at a much longer time frame.
I was sometimes excited about, okay, let's release. And you're like, be patient. Let's release, let's be patient. So I tell people that story and they're like, let me get this straight. You didn't sell a bottle of wine for 6 years before you sold your first bottle? And I said, nope.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, and that's why we know why people don't do vintage sparkling wine, because it's a bit of a risk. We would open bottles and we would taste them and I'd be like, it's ready. And you're like, no, it isn't. And that was an education for me, so.
And there's no cheating that. Yeah. We've not been able to get around that with any technique, so
right. Yeah.
It's about time in the bottle, and that's been a mark for us of quality.
I mean, here we are now, 12 years later, tasting this, and it's absolutely fantastic. Amazing. Cheers to you. When we hired Andrew Davis at Lytle Barnett, I didn't even know it at the time, but his wife is Isabelle Monnier. She studied under Dominique Lafon. She went to University of Dijon. She also went to the University of Lincoln down in New Zealand and was the winemaker at Felton Road. She's a world-class winemaker, clearly a rock star in this community, and has done it year in and year out since about 2007 when she got here. When we planted the Anahata vineyard in 2015, we knew we were going to make a still wine, but we were patient, and Isabelle wanted to wait until the vineyard was ready to produce an estate-quality wine.
When I got into the wine industry, I specialized in Pinot and Chardonnay, in huge part because Pinot is really unforgiving, and it's one of the most challenging grapes. And then I got into Chardonnay afterwards because I found Chardonnay even more difficult, in a sense, and I love to challenge myself.
It's great to work with a husband and wife. The fun part with Andrew and Isabelle Isabel loves sparkling wine and Andrew loves still wine, but they don't make it themselves. So they share each other's product. You know, we jumped into sparkling wine first, but it wasn't until 19 that we produced our first aubaine. Hi, Is. Good. Good. We're here to talk about the first vintage we ever did together.
Yes, isn't that amazing?
2019.
Santé.
Yeah, I think, you know, when I talk to people about this wine, you know, if you don't really want to put a thought in their head, but the first thing I tell them is Chablis. I love the minerality in this wine. I love the freshness of this wine.
As a winemaker, there is the challenge that we love, which is trying to make the best wine for your project. And then there is also the challenge of, are we going to get along as far as stylistic goals are?
Right.
Because there's that too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I think we hit it off pretty
We did.
good.
We hit it off good. Yep.
We hit it off pretty
Yeah.
good right away. We did these tastings in the beginning when we first met, these comparative tastings, so that I could figure out wine style with him, where he brought a bunch of Burgundies. He has a great palate and he knows what he likes, and it jives with, it is totally there.
As you know, when we came into this, I was afraid of oak. You know, I did not want our
I remember the first oak order I asked you to sign up
Scared
on.
the hell out of
and-
me.
Oh yes, you were like, this many barrels? I was like, it's okay, don't
Yeah,
you worry,
yeah.
we're gonna do a good
Yeah,
thing.
because we do 10% new oak on the Chardonnay. Yeah. So, you know, I was a little bit nervous on that influence, but you did such a great job educating me that oak is like a spice rack, right? It's to season your food, you're not supposed to taste it. And I can tell you that, you know, over the years of people trying this 19, everybody thinks it's on stainless. Everybody thinks it's on stainless, and this is 100% oak. You can't taste oak on it, but it gives it such a great balance and flavor.
Yeah.
Good education for me.
You know, we all learn to trust the process and realize that on the outcome, people think it's stainless because it's fresh
Right.
and lean, but you can play with oak and have those extra layers on complexity from the lees contact and everything without losing freshness if you can
And
work
it's the oak
with
that
precision.
gives it that length. If it was
Yes.
stainless, we wouldn't have the length. Yeah, it's wonderful.
There is nice floral and citrus fruit character.
Yeah.
It is starting to get slightly honey tones on the nose, which is kind of fun. And but more importantly, it's a great food wine. Like you can enjoy it on a sunny afternoon, but it's got enough concentration and depth that you can also have it with beautiful food.
And not too acidic, it's just fresh. Aubaine, which is French for the word windfall, you know, is we're trying to keep that almost French perspective in there, not trying to create French wine, but at the same time, understanding and recognizing the generations and the years of unbelievable winemaking that's gone on over there. You know, why wouldn't we try to replicate something like that?
Or adopt those great traditions
yeah.
in these and adopt a similar style. We have similar weather. We
That's
have
right.
similar growing
Latitude,
seasons.
yeah.
Yes. Hey, thank you for having me work with you. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Aubaine is single vineyard estate wines from the Anahata vineyard, but eventually will also come from the Windfall vineyard. Windfall is the synonym for serendipity, and it's going to be our estate site along with the Anahata vineyard here in the Yosemite Hills. The opportunity to really focus ourselves on just a few vineyards, 2 of them being our estate vineyards. That allows us to control every aspect of the winemaking process, the vineyard process, with the blocks, with the wind aspects, with the shade, the sunrise and the sunset of the vineyard. Really some cool things that we'll be able to do in the future. I think what's interesting about the Willamette Valley is that it's really a true story about climate change. Where our vineyard sits right now, 15 years ago, you wouldn't be able to get anything to ripen. It was too cold. But as things are starting to warm up, as Chardonnay began to ripen, opportunities for planting new vineyards that weren't available before began to happen. And the Yosemite Hills is now becoming a bit of a darling because we have these cooler weather. So we have a little bit of a later bud break. We have the opportunity for longer hang time, which really creates those quality characteristics that we're really looking for in great still wines as well as for sparkling wines.
Because of my relationship with my husband, like I met him at university when we were both studying to be winemakers, and right then when we started dating, he was like, I want to make sparkling wine, and I thought, this is weird to me. Wine's complicated enough. Why would you start with something that's even more complicated? And I think that Andy was kind of the same way. And I think it was wise.
Him coming to me looking to make Oregon's finest sparkling, I felt like that was a challenge that I was more than happy to accept. I was ready to make that wine.
I've always been a champagne fanatic. I've always loved the wine. I've always enjoyed it. Not just for celebrations, not just for special events. We're in Dundee, Oregon. This is going to be the Lytle Barnett Aubaine tasting room. Just took over the lease just in the last few weeks, so it's very exciting, building out the space. This is really the first time of us doing anything in this tasting room. Okay, so we're gonna open the 2023 Brut for the very first time. So we've just added sugar and yeast, and so that creates the opportunity for the secondary fermentation to happen in the bottle. So this won't have any effervescence in it right now, but the quality's still gonna be there. Again, this is gonna be treated almost exactly like still wine at this moment. Wonderful sugars. You know, you can taste a little bit of that yeast in there, but the fruit and the quality of that wine is really exceptional. Really excited to see how this one turns out.
Andy will never stop pushing the limits of wanting to tweak and excel and improve.
So when we started Lytle Barnett back in 2013, there were only a few people really doing high-end sparkling wine, and there were very few doing vintage. But now there's probably 80 wonderful producers that are producing non-vintage and vintage traditional method here in the Willamette Valley.
We are not trying to revolutionize a new wine. We aren't doing new tactics. We aren't doing anything crazy or wild. We aren't championing new varietals. We're just trying to be the absolute best that's out there.